Are you ready to create a masterpiece that's perfect for celebrating the Lunar New Year? In this tutorial, I will guide you step by step to paint this stunning watercolor snake. Whether you're looking to celebrate the year of snake or just master watercolor techniques, this tutorial is packed with tips to make your art shine. If you're new here, I'm Wendy, a Taiwanese self-taught artist living in Texas. In this channel, I share tips, techniques, and inspiration I've picked up along my journey. My goal is to help you to grow as an artist and create in your own unique way, no matter where you're starting from. So join me to discover new skills and let's grow together.
Before painting, let's look at the sketch process. First, outline the snake. Lightly sketch the snake's body, ensuring it curves naturally for a dynamic composition. No need to sketch the lower part of the snake's body that's in the shadow. We can just apply a darker wash later. Then mark the scales. Pay attention to the perspective. The part of the snake closer to the viewer will appear larger, and the further sections will narrow. Use the diagram reference. Gradually decrease the size of the scales as the body curves into the distance. Follow the snake's curvature for a realistic effect. You can mark light guidelines for scales orientation to help with the coloring process later. Then for the cherry blossom, draw loose outlines of cherry blossoms clustered around the snake. Focus on simple petal shapes and indicate where the buds are. These are not the main focus point, so detailed drawing is not necessary. Before coloring, let's look at the reference photo. No matter what you're going to paint, we first need to determine where the light is coming from. If you're a beginner, I suggest adjusting the photo to black and white so it's easier to identify the bright area and the shadows. In this snake painting, the left side of the snake is where the light source is, and the right side, which are marked with red lines, represents the shadow areas. With this perspective in mind, when you apply colors later, you'll have a better idea of where to place darker shade and which areas to leave bright. For the background wash, wet the entire paper with clean water using a large flat brush. Make sure every edge is covered with a thin layer of clean water. Take your time to brush the paper a few times to ensure it absorbs the water evenly. Next, apply a light layer of lavender around the shadow areas while the paper is still wet, avoiding the cherry flowers and leaving the bright reflective areas on the snake's body blank. If you're a beginner, I suggest mixing the color beforehand so it's ready to use afterward. After that, add a bit of purple to strengthen and enrich the shadows. Also, add a little pink color around the flower buds. At this stage, don't worry about the snake's color, we're just adding a base wash for the whole background. Now let's paint the snake's body. Make sure to leave the bright side of the snake's body blank while coloring. For the shadow areas, you can add a darker tone or complementary colors to reduce saturation. This helps offset the bright side with saturated colors, creating a sense of depth in the painting. For the lighter patterns on the snake's body, simply use a napkin to wipe off the colors. The shapes of the patterns don't need to be perfect, just roughly indicate their locations. Next, use a lighter color mix with opaque white to mark out the snake's scales. Now that the paper is dried, I switch to a smaller paintbrush to define the eyes, nostrils, and scales with dark paints. Then I add shadows to each scales on the snake's body. For the scales that are in shadow, make sure to darken the color accordingly. As the scales become smaller, use lighter and thinner strokes. Focus less on detail to simulate distance. After that, I noticed the shadows on the snake's body seems too light, so I went back and darkened the shadows around the bends of the snake and where it overlaps itself to add dimension. Now move on to the flowers. First wet the flower area partially, then apply some transparent pink color you like around the flower buds, and keep the edges soft for a loose style. For the background shadows, wet the area behind the snake and flowers section by section to apply colors, allowing for better control over blending. Use a darker mix of blue and violet you like for the background. Keep in mind that watercolor tends to fade slightly after drying, so ensure the mixture contains less water to make the colors stronger and effectively enhance the shadows. After that, add the tree trunks. They are not the focal point of the painting, so avoid adding too many details. Simply indicate where the trunks are and apply darker shades to the shadow areas. Leave some white spots in the bright areas while coloring to create a natural look. Now let's paint the cherry blossoms. Use a small brush and slightly darker mixture of pink based on your preference to add shadows in between the petals, especially where the petals overlapped to roughly define their shapes, and add some pollen details in the flower buds. Keep in mind that these are in the bright areas, so even the darker shades should remain lighter than those in the shadow areas. After that, darken the branches behind the blossoms to add contrast, and lightly blend them into the background wash. For the snake's head, I went back to add another layer to the snake's head to make it stand out more. For the patterns on the face, apply a gradient of color, darker towards the shadows areas, and gradually lighter on the bright side. Lastly, the highlights, I used a small brush and white gouache to add highlights to scales to create a refractive effect, particularly near the head and curved sections. Also, add highlights in the eyes with a tiny dot of white.
Thank you for following along with this snake painting tutorial. I hope you enjoyed the process and learned some new techniques. If you like this video, don't forget to check out my other related animal painting tutorials for tips on painting animal details, mastering wet on whitewash, and creating realistic shadows. I would also love to see your finished artworks, so feel free to share it with me on social media. Keep creating and happy painting!